Hi, I'm Esther Rodriguez with Atlanta Community Food Bank, and I'm here to read you a story today. Harvesting Friends, written by Kathleen Contreras, illustrated by Gary Undercuffer. Lupe loved her family's salsa garden with its tomatoes, chili peppers, onions, garlic, and cilantro. Her mother cooked, roasted, chopped, and grinded everything together to make chunky salsa to eat with salty chips and tacos. In the spring, Lupe and her family dug into the rich soil to plant the seeds and tiny plants. They wrote each plant's name on thin popsicle sticks. All summer, Lupe and her family watered, fed, and weeded the garden. But one summer day, all the big red tomatoes were gone. Lupe looked in between the branches, but no luck. The biggest, juiciest tomatoes had disappeared. Mama, the big tomatoes are gone. They were almost ready to be picked, Lupe said as she ran into the house. Are you sure? Said Mama, as they hurried outside to investigate. I wonder what happened, said Lupe, looking under the tangle of bushes. Lupe saw a small necklace with a gold medal on the ground. She picked it up and gave it to Mama. Who could have dropped it, Mama? She asked. I'm not sure, but I think someone left it here on purpose, Mama said, caressing the pretty medal. 2 weeks later, when Lupe walked into the garden, she saw a boy crouching on his knees over the tomato plants. With a couple of big tomatoes beside him, he was reaching deep to pick the biggest one. What are you doing? Shouted Lupe, surprising him. He started to run, but tripped on the rake. He fell on the tomatoes and red juice splashed all over him. Wait, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Lupe recognized Antonio, the new boy in school. Why are you taking our tomatoes? She asked. We don't have much money. The tomatoes looked so good, and I left my gold necklace here in exchange for the tomatoes, he said. My grandmother gave it to me when we left Mexico. It's very valuable. I figured it would be a fair trade. Suddenly, Lupe had an idea. If you help me with the garden, I'll give you your necklace and some tomatoes. Deal? Deal, said Antonio, already picking up the rake, ready to work. Antonio started weeding, and Lupe went inside to tell her mother what had happened. Later, Mama invited Antonio to eat lunch, and she gave him some tomatoes and a jar of salsa to take home. She placed the jar in a bag and said, bread that is shared tastes better. Mama, you forgot something, said Lupe, giving the necklace back to Antonio. No, you keep it until the work is done, he said. Lupe and Antonio became friends over the summer. They weeded, watered, and picked tomatoes, onions, chiles, and cilantro. They even planted corn and lettuce. Their mothers also became friends and shared the garden's harvest. Almost 2 months later, the growing season ended. Lupe and Antonio composted the plants, leaves, and stems, recycling all the plant's nutrients back to the soil. Lupe returned the gold necklace to Antonio, and he accepted it. Lupe had a great idea for the next year's garden. Let's ask our neighbors to help, said Lupe to her mother. With everyone helping, it will be easier. When spring arrived, they invited their neighbors to pitch in. Dozens of families brought money and tools and started working. Lupe and Antonio bought seeds and small vegetable plants with the donations. With everyone's help, they finished planting in one day. 2 months later, the tomatoes grew in all shapes, sizes, and colors. Some tomatoes were round, others oval and pear-shaped. There were yellow, orange, red, and even purple ones. Like a family, the community worked together, taking care of young plants. A pair of brothers planted 2 kinds of peppers, fire red and green. A grandmother and her grandchildren grew bunches of fragrant herbs for cooking and healing. A father grew watermelon, which his son made into cool watermelon juice. 3 sisters grew squash, beans, and corn, America's first crops. The garden, like a colorful Mexican blanket, embraced everyone who worked on it. The garden grew, and soon it became more than a place where hunger was fed. It became a gathering place, like a kitchen where everyone comes together to eat and share. They shared stories and offered gardening secrets. They even celebrated birthdays and special holidays. The new Amigos garden grew more than just plants, it grew friendships. Although Antonio left his necklace in exchange, he still took tomatoes without asking. When Lupe found him in the garden, she learned Antonio's family did not have much. Lupe asked him to help her in the garden, and she would share some produce with him. They became friends, learned to share and help each other, and as a result, Lupe and Antonio also helped bring their neighbors together to build a community around the garden. Be sure to check out the end of the book where you can find recipe from Lupe's salsa garden. Thank you for joining me today. You can find other stories read by fellow food bankers on our YouTube page.